What did I do wrong?
Nothing. Calm down.
No! Why are you leaving me if I didn't do anything wrong? I don't understand. I thought you liked me!
Pearl is misunderstood. Not just the main character of A24's latest horror, but the film itself. It's not exactly the splatterfest that X was, and those that were expecting a prequel filled with more geriatric nudity and kills than the first were naturally disappointed. Instead, they were met with the deeper, more meditative character study. I saw Pearl without any real hype at all. I hadn't even seen X. So for me to come out of the theater and see the lukewarm response that it received felt criminal. I think it deserves more. And considering recent events, Pearl warrants some discussion and a little praise. Now, more than ever. Ti West's ongoing horror trilogy is first and foremost about movies. Specifically, the power that movies have over people's ambitions, their dreams, and their actions. A far cry from the behind-the-scenes grit and grime of X, Pearl focuses on the love for cinema and the glamour that surrounds it. The sweeping orchestral soundtrack that kicks off A24's Pearl instantly transports us to a simpler time for movies. The year is 1918. We follow a farm girl who lives with her overbearing mother and ill father. She dreams of becoming a star, but the Spanish flu and her mother's strict rules make life increasingly difficult. Pearl lives in desperate times. The happy moments of her life are stuck in memories and photographs. Waiting for her husband to return from war, the harsh circumstances that she finds herself in are slowly becoming permanent. When taking a closer look at Pearl's themes, there are some obvious homages to draw from here, the most notable one being The Wizard of Oz. In both, we see a poor farm girl badgered by a strict maternal figure in a bright, poppy, technicolor world. Obvious references aside, such as Pearl's mother embodying the Wicked Witch of the West, or Pearl's father serving as a Tin Man, the writers are definitely thinking about these parallels, but it's not a one-to-one thing. It's more of an ode to these classic archetypes and symbols from Hollywood's golden age. Pearl also names her pets after famous actors of the time, so it's clear from the get-go that Hollywood has an influence on her, and these symbols inform her life.
It was less literally informed probably than in which you're phrasing it, but you know, it's not lost to me that we were making a sort of Technicolor-inspired 1940s movie that happened to have a scarecrow. But yeah, I mean, it was really, there's a element of evoking this kind of era of filmmaking and the sort of wonder that came with that kind of filmmaking and a sort of fantasy to that, and there's a childlike nature to that, or certain Disney movies of the era and things like that, and it felt like an interesting contrast for a much darker story.
Pretty early on, these bright visuals do in fact give way to a darker story. Most things in Pearl have a darker side to them, like these newsreels that are way too gory to be shown in an ordinary theater. It's prominently seen in her family dynamic. From pictures, we can see that they were once a happy family. These days, however, Pearl's mother punishes her and sees her dreams as a foolish thing. Her father is gravely sick. He has an illness that is never really explained, but is meant to represent a few things. The influenza that spreads outside their door, as well as the burden Pearl feels of being stuck at the farm. She ultimately loves her father, but due to his condition, you can feel that there's a sense of resentment lingering in some scenes. It's later revealed that Howard's enlistment was voluntary, a way to get back at his family despite hurting Pearl the most. Pearl's circumstances often take her further away from what she wants, but as she's told time and time again,
one day you'll understand that getting what you want isn't what's important. Making the most of what you have is.
The film culminates in this incredible monologue. All of Pearl's wishes and regrets are laid bare to the viewer. It really warms you to Pearl. You feel for her. All she wanted was to be loved, but with her father incapacitated and her mother driven away by her murderous ways, it feels like an impossibility. Pearl's monologue is of course one of the film's high points, but an overlooked scene in Pearl is Ruth's monologue, which is equal parts heart-wrenching as it is terrifying. In some ways, it's the inverse of Pearl's subdued monologue. They're loud, violent threats from a character who typically keeps her head down, versus the soft-spoken thoughts of a character capable of such explosive violence. The biggest parallel in the film exists between Pearl and her mother. In the film's opening moments, Pearl is caught admiring herself in her mother's dress. The music stops, the lights turn back on, and she's told to change it to her work clothes. Her power and confidence are lost in this moment. She eventually ends up taking other dresses during some pivotal moments in the story where she needs her confidence back. At the film's end, after Pearl's rejection from the dance troupe, she plays the role of a poor farm girl once again. She wears her overalls, a symbol of her power lost. We come to find out that Ruth has also had a hard life. It was essentially stolen from her when her husband became ill. Due to this, Pearl's mother no longer wears those nice clothes either. Keeping this power dynamic of clothing in mind, we can see this as a symbol of her power lost, and even a glimpse into Pearl's future. Delving further into this idea, when Maxine wears the overalls, she does so without wearing anything else underneath. She's less inhibited than Pearl, and was able to escape her strict environment, shifting the power dynamic of the farm girl's uniform.
Take it from me. Letting outdated traditions control how you live your life will get you nowhere.
Pearl comes to understand these similarities between her and her mother, and attempts to make amends when she visits her body in the root cellar. For a brief moment, she's alive and embracing her. She says "I love you" to her mother in German, which is the only instance of her speaking German in the film. Unfortunately, by the time she realizes this, it's far too late. Food, and most notably, the dinner table, also play an important role in Pearl. The film is set in a time of great famine, yet food is abundant at Pearl's farmhouse, to the point where so much of it goes to waste. This abundance of food is thanks mostly in part to Pearl's mother. As she puts it, it's a result of how we conduct our lives. After her death, the food begins to spoil, and from this point on, there isn't a shot of food that's not discarded, smashed, or otherwise left to rot. It reminds me of the rotted out food in The Witch. In that film, the rotting corn husks were the results of an evil hex that cursed the family. That's not to say that Pearl's exactly a witch or anything, but evil certainly follows her. The film's most pivotal moments also take place around the dinner table, which is commonly seen as a place where families bond and share heart-to-hearts. Pearl even goes about trying to fix her mistakes by setting the table for a family dinner, albeit in her own tragic way. Despite the brutality, decay, and overall mayhem on display here, I still find Pearl to be a sympathetic movie with an equally sympathetic protagonist. Even on my second viewing, the emotions were palpable. I really felt for this murderous girl stuck on her farm. She tried and failed. Her character has a lot of depth, and the film really kicks off in the second half, once Pearl makes some bad decisions that are unfortunately irreversible. I feel for Pearl so much. She longs for freedom, for love, for acceptance. She desires so much that she commits these cruel acts to achieve her dream, and has met with rejection every step of the way. I'm sure everyone has known this kind of longing at some point in their lives, and unfortunately, most of us are familiar with the rejection that follows too. In essence, Pearl is about the belief that you are more than who you are at this moment, which makes it even more tragic that she tries to escape her means throughout the film, but by the end, she buries this belief in herself, and figures that this is where she belongs. But Pearl was misunderstood, and she deserved more.
You're a good friend. Emma?
Many expected another slasher set on a farm or maybe some sort of villainous or chaotic origin story. Instead, what we find is a character that's less cold-hearted and ruthless than we may have initially thought. Someone deserving his sympathy, as she tries to fix her fatal mistakes. Since they're so closely connected, I figure I may as well share some thoughts on X. I gotta be honest, I wasn't a big fan of X. First and foremost, after seeing someone who's so sympathetic and developed in this film, Pearl was regrettably one-dimensional here. For all the tactfulness that I found in Pearl, there were seemingly an equal number of tactless moments in X. Between the edgier characters and strangely graphic scenes of elderly sex, I didn't know what to think. It has its moments. The ending sequence was especially well done, but I personally felt like it lacked what I enjoyed in Pearl. Major character reveals are left for the very end, and much of the cast feels disposable. Although there's only one person left standing at the end of each film, can we really say we got to know the cast of X? Still, it's a decent slasher flick, and it's certainly different. It has more to do with making and discussing movies, which I really enjoyed. I like its themes of entrepreneurship and really carving something out for yourself. Maybe carving is a poor choice of words. It's pretty brutal in some spots, and I can see now what people expected in Pearl. That same brutality isn't exactly gone, but it's used in a different context. The biggest threat in X was Pearl, who by this point in her life is so disconnected that the violence becomes sudden and meaningless. The biggest threat in Pearl is also Pearl, so having the violence connect more to her inner feelings was a necessary move. Where X focuses on visceral kills and quick sprays of blood splatter, Pearl has so many scenes of rot and decay littered throughout that are used to illustrate a feeling of something eating away at you slowly.
It's an awful feeling like rot, the way it just twists and turns at your insides. I know that aching so well.
If there's anything to say technically about both of these movies, it's that it's peaking a lot. It's like when someone blows out a bad speaker or records the audio way too close to the action.
Man, not my house!
Something that really encapsulates the difference between X and Pearl is their attitudes towards violence. There's an unnecessary cruelty in X, in contrast to the emotional weight in Pearl. In X, much of the violence is glossed over, sudden and sharp. One scene that exemplifies this is when Lorraine tries to escape. She breaks the door and tries to undo the lock until her fingers are mangled. It's not even discussed. They don't linger on the damage, and when she's found later with Maxine, She doesn't even mention what happened to her fingers. It's a very masculine view of violence. One second you're here, and the next, you're gone. Much like Jackson, who's gunned down off-screen in a matter of seconds. Or Wayne, a larger-than-life character who meets his end without a word, skewered by Pearl's hand. This all works in contrast to the very emotionally charged deaths in Pearl. Pearl's mother erupts in a burst of flames, only to suffer for days in the basement until she finally succumbs to her injuries. Mitzi is chased, hacked to pieces, and disposed of, and we bear witness to it all, from the initial blow to the cleanup process. That's not even including the one murder that Pearl actually regrets, her father. All these executions have emotional weight to them, and are tied to Pearl's emotions, whether they be rage, jealousy, or sorrow. With this in mind, it really shows how much Mia Goth's involvement in the writing of Pearl helped it to take on a different tone than X. I know this isn't completely verifiable, but I would personally consider X to be a film by Ti West, and Pearl to be a film by Mia Goth.
To an extent, whenever you receive a script, I find you have to do a little bit of rewrite here and there with a script. But this was the first time that I've actually had the opportunity to create this world and this character Pearl from its very conception. And you know, I'd never written in such a formal format like this before, and so Ty in many ways guided me along, and he would email me, or we would FaceTime, and he would tell me, okay, so we're at this part of the story and we're in need of such and such information. And you know, I tried to write it in the typical format, but that was quite difficult, and I struggled somewhat with the structure of it. And so eventually he just told me to, you know, just put a timer on for 20 minutes, 45 minutes, and just go. And then we kind of really got into a groove with it, and I found that to be really enjoyable, and then I would send that over to him, and then he would then incorporate that into the script.
We'll never know for sure just how much of the script was crafted from Mia Goth's writings, but at the very least, it's clear that she helped inform what it became. Now, let's talk elevated horror.
You know, I think especially in this day and age, the genre of horror has become such an umbrella term, and so much can exist within that, and it really gives a lot of creative free rein for filmmakers and actors to explore a whole series of themes and characters, and that's one of the things that makes it so interesting.
Any horror that's been released in the past several years has a question looming over its head at all times. Is this elevated horror? A24 especially has been releasing genre films that stray outside the traditional mold that horror films find themselves in. Horror fans have begun to call these films elevated horror. Some people hate the term, because at first glance it seems dismissive of horror, but I feel it's more of a way to signify an evolution for the genre. It's not a perfect term, but it's something that says, these films change the way we think about typical horror films. One of the bigger criticisms against elevated horror is that it describes A24 films exclusively, but you could say it's an idea that's been around for a while. Regardless of how you feel about the term, it's undeniable that horror films are going through a major shift right now. They're straying further and further away from studio horrors, and going in more unexpected directions. Horror is a genre built on surprise. The audience doesn't know what to expect when they walk into a horror film, so you can really only go up from there. As Goth mentioned earlier, it's an umbrella term. At its heart, Pearl is less about being a horror film and more about branching out into a dramatic character study with the themes of longing, rejection, and abandonment tied within. With that out of the way, it's time to talk about another elephant in the room when it comes to modern horror films.
Fuck the Oscars, you know? Fuck the Oscars! Fuck you!
Horror leads have been snubbed historically, but as we see year after year of great performances, the Academy still overlooks horror films. This year, that unfortunately includes Mia Goth and Pearl. She undoubtedly deserved a nomination at the very least, and had one of the best performances of the year with her monologue. Mia Goth was recently asked about her Oscar snub, and how the Academy ignores horror in general. She gave a very candid answer about campaigning and the politics behind Oscar nominations.
I think that it's very political, and that it's not entirely based on the quality of a project per se. I think there's a lot going on. There are a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to nominations and who's and categories that are recognized.
I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that either, but I think that's true. I think a lot of people know that, and I don't know why. I think a shift should take place, really, and if they wanted to, engage with the wider public, I think it would be of benefit, really.
Alexander Skarsgård, however, stays pretty tight-lipped. It's well known that A24 doesn't market their films very well during campaign season, but there's a rumor floating around that they focus all their budget and time into promoting Everything Everywhere All at Once, and well, make it that what you will. Focusing on the future and Maxine for a second, Ti West has already said in interviews that it's going to be a really different movie from X and Pearl, so that's something to keep in mind before watching it. It's most likely going to take more time than Pearl did, but to be fair, they worked really hard to put this out the same year as X. Still, with all the recent remakes and revivals of decades-old horror series, it's really interesting to see a new horror franchise spring up so quickly, though it may stray further away from its horror roots. Maybe we'll finally see Goth get some recognition for what will hopefully be another incredible performance. Before I sign off, I just wanted to say thank you to the over 100 people who subscribed recently. In the last video, I was celebrating 25 subs, and now we're nearing 150. Thanks so much for always checking out the videos, liking and commenting. The comments especially really help me when I'm working on the next one. Also, just wanted to say that I have chapters on every one of my videos. I don't know why YouTube doesn't load them for me, but you can find them all in the description. Okay, that should be it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.